Well, prepare for severely rusted out cars more than usual. I know, like in the wintertime in the Northeast, you got rusted out cars because of salt on the road, and actually, you don't see it right away till a few years later. But it is a concern if you just bought a new car because actually, what's the deal? We just had a record sales of new cars in November of 2015. Record sales, and I can guarantee you that a good amount of those record sales were up in the Northeast because that's one of the most populous areas, and it's also the area where we're in the snow belt. But it's not the snow, it's not the ice, it's not even really the water that is the main ruster of cars. I know water can rust, water and oxygen can create rust, but it is actually the salt on the roads and actually a new solution, brine. And brine has been used for a while. It's salt solution. But what's coming into play now, you know where it really plays havoc on is your brake lines. Besides, the things that aren't really coated too much, and they're made out of like a mild steel, and you know they have a little bit of a rust protection on them, but it wears away pretty fast, believe me. So, and cars, new cars don't come with stainless steel lines. So, you know, one of these days you're riding down the road and you had some rust on your car underneath, and it's on the brake lines, maybe up behind the gas tank, and all of a sudden you step on your brakes and, you know, yeah, it happens, man. It happens, even on cars that are only a few years old. Now, I'm going to tell you this. I think this winter is going to start out slow. We're actually going to have a probably more severe winter, or at least as on par as last year in the Northeast. Now, I'm down at south, but I plan to be going up there this winter probably just to take a trip one time for the hell of it, and we'll see what it's about. But as far in, I'm from up north originally, so I'm aware of what goes on. I was actually up there one time when they had the blizzards of 77, 78, and also the record snows they had 95 and 96. I was up there one time then briefly, and for that whole winter actually, but I wasn't there for that long a period of time, but I was there for the whole winter, and that was on par with what had happened last year. Now I know out west it was very mild, pretty much, but it's the beginning of this winter. Just to give you a little caveat here, the beginning of the winter is going to start out kind of slow this year because of the El Nino. In fact, it should be milder than usual in December, but the El Nino is going to drop off pretty damn fast, and we're going to get the Siberian Express in the Northeast especially, but also in the Midwest, and they're going to be salting roads a lot. And what they do is, see, here's the deal that's different now. First off, if it's colder temperatures, they have to use a heavier concentration of salt or brine, and they're using more and more brine. Actually, a lot of mechanics are making note that they're replacing brake lines on cars a lot more often in the last couple of years than they were 5 years preceding that. And that's because they're using brine. Now, I'm going to tell you, you know, they're stocking up on materials, but you know where they're getting a lot of their materials from? And this is something that's not commonly known, the materials for the roads. Now, they don't do this in every state. Like in Pennsylvania, they don't do it except in certain circumstances, but they're using the brine from the oil fields. You know, the oil field, the shale oil production, they inject brine into the ground and then to break it up so they can extract the oil. Now, in the states that use it, they say they test it for safety. But there's been other environmental groups out there saying that it has trace elements of like toxic metals and stuff that are getting into our well water supply. So, you know, but I'm looking at it like this, you know, they're using a lot more brine versus rock salt. Rock salt's not good, but they're using a lot more brine because it's cheaper, because it's coming from the oil field production. And you got to figure this, you know, the oil field production's going way down, so they probably got a lot of brine on hand, and maybe there's a lot of oil fields that are upside down, so maybe they're selling it to the municipalities cheap. I could pretty much figure this, right? So what do you think they're going to be using really on the roads this winter? A lot more than usual, even more than the last couple years, is brine versus rock salt. Now, to have these stronger solutions is actually good in some circumstances. Like you could see, the obvious cases would be on bridges, because bridges freeze before regular, you know, roadways, and also on heavy intersections. And there's a cost of like having people having more accidents and fatal accidents even besides the damage to the cars, and it could be the harm to people and even people being killed from these accidents on ice. But um, there is actually a major cost that's being associated with cars falling apart a lot faster and brake lines being having to be replaced. And you're seeing what's going on. I think a lot of people are aware, like up in New York State, have a 5-year-old truck with no floor in it because it just totally rusted away because, well, partly the way the freaking manufacturers design this stuff. I mean, it works great in Texas or Oklahoma or out west someplace in New Mexico or something, or even in the snowier places up in Utah or Wyoming, because they probably don't salt the roads to the extent that they do in the major cities in the Northeast. Oh my God! And you look at what they do to the roads. The roadways themselves are getting destroyed, eaten away by this stuff. But they'll look at it like this. They take like, what does it cost us for like man hours of plowing? What does it cost us? Because that's what's figured. Because they'll salt the roads first. At least they should be. They should be salting them or putting the brine on first before the snow comes down. Because this way, when they plow, that slushy mixture on the bottom, when the plow comes through, it pretty much cleans it right to the bottom. If they put it on after the snow comes down, it just really refreezes into ice. Some people do that though. Some places do that, but they should put it on the roads beforehand. And what it does is it does save money in plowing costs, in labor. The number, because they got to keep the trucks on the road. They got to pay people to drive them. They got to pay fuel. They got to pay maintenance, and there's overtime hours involved and all that type of stuff. So yeah, there's using the salt and the brine does save money, but then on the other hand, it's tearing up the roads. It's probably now, even though they say not all states are using the oil field brine, the stuff that comes from the oil fields, the fracking, and that in itself is a hint as to what damage it actually probably is potentially causing, because not just with the brake lines and the undercarriage of the car, but also to the environment. Because the states that do use the oil field brine say they are testing it. They say they're testing it. But then some states, like Pennsylvania, doesn't use it unless in certain circumstances, but not generally. They won't use oil field brine at all. So I'm thinking, well, why will they not use it at all? Even if some states can say they test it and it's fine, and some states won't use it. It's kind of like telling you that maybe it isn't so damn safe for the environment, because it doesn't take that many trace elements to really disrupt the water supply. And you got to figure if this brine was pumped through the earth, it probably picked up all these other minerals and stuff and whatever else is out there. I don't know what. I mean, so I know somebody on here is going to probably from the oil companies going to come on here and comment and say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. But I'm using some common sense on this deal. The brine not only is rusting out the cars a lot faster than the plain rock salt, but it's, and besides the bodies and the brake lines, it doing road damage, and it may be harming the environment and getting into the soil, into the well water, into where the trees grow and all that type of stuff, which, the trees are growing from the groundwater, right? They're tapping it. They got the tap root that's going into the groundwater. So it's probably poisoning our environment in a lot of ways. And, there is no happy solution, but, maybe the plain old rock salt might be the better thing to do instead of this oil field brine. Now, I realize the oil fields, since they're going down, and you got oil right now, I think it's below $40 a barrel as of today on the WTI, December 2nd, 2015. Well, maybe this video, if somebody looks at it 2 years from now, maybe it'll be $250 a barrel. I don't know. Markets are all over the place with oil, that's for sure. But, yeah, I think it's because they're trying to find some source of income right now, and since they're closing shop, they might have all this brine they use for operations that they're no longer using. They're no longer in those operations for extracting the oil, the shale oil. They're probably selling the brine to the municipalities very cheap. So you're going to see a hell of a lot, and that's what's been going on over the last 2 or 3 years. The mixture that's been on the road, there's always been brine, there's always been rock salt, but there's been more brine because of the oil industries are selling the brine to the municipalities. Not in every state, but in a lot of states. And so there's more brine on the road than rock salt, and that's why cars are rusting out even faster. Now, I even want to say something else because, you think cars are made better today? No, they're not. They're not. It's a joke the way they're making these cars today. They can make them better. I talked about, Cosmoline, which has been a mil spec Cosmoline military specification. Cosmoline, that's been around, I think, since the 1800s. I know it was in the World War II or the late 1800s to preserve military hardware, guns, artillery, munitions, anything like that are stored even on ship decks that are exposed to salt spray. You can spray that inside your car, inside the doors, inside the rocker panels, inside the quarter panels, and even on the undercarriage. And that probably will do a it will do a much better job than spraying a lot of other coatings. But even though it's been known for like 100 something years, that nobody uses it because it's. I say it's a conspiracy, man. They want you to just keep buying new shit, you and then eventually they'll have all aluminum cars, but by that time, it'll be an expensive, probably vehicle that is high maintenance for electronics, to get you one way or the other. Today, I mean, you can't fix a car as easily as you can back in the day. They say they're more reliable, but they're not easier to fix, that's for sure. It's more complex, electronic systems and things. But some things are still the same because steel is steel and steel rusts. But today's cars are made out of like paper thin steel compared to what they were. And what they do a lot of times is they put styrofoam behind the steel. They inject, no, it's not styrofoam. It's a foam though. It's a type of foam. They inject it behind the steel, like around the wheel wells and things. And what happens is it's there just to give some extra support to the paper thin metal. But what happens is where that foam is, any moisture that traps in there, it stays there. And it rusts out that paper thin sheet metal real fast. So I just want to I'm going to tell you one solution. I think the Cosmoline is a good thing to use, and if you're under the car and you see any rust, you can use something. I like using Chassis Saver's good, or Pour 15, or if you really want to be fast with the spray can, use the rust converting primer from Rust-Oleum, or I think they got other brands besides Rust-Oleum, but I always use the Rust-Oleum brand. Rust Converter Primer, and it converts the rust to like it actually chemically converts it, makes it like a hard primed surface. Then I just put a coat of enamel over it. That's pretty good stuff. Then after you do that, you put some rubberized undercoating. And a little bit, but if it's on the inside, you're probably gonna have to inject something on the inside of the car because to keep it from rusting. Like Cosmoline might be your best bet. And even if you don't have that, it could be detailer's wax, WD-40, I don't know, anything like that, man. Anything. If you get on the inside, where it comes from it rusts from the inside out, which is like the quarter panels and all that type of stuff, you'll be saving a lot of money because I think a lot of people, like you see in 2014, the average age of automobiles was at an all-time high, which means oldness high, like high age, 11 years, right, in 2014. And that is, so, and it was actually very low automobile sales in 2014. They weren't doing that great. They're doing okay, but not that good. Now in 2015, it looks like they're having a record year, partly because people are, and I'm leading up to something because, most people when they're buying these new cars today, that with the record sales in 2015, especially the month of November 2015, but for the whole year, they're planning on keeping them, hanging on to them forever. And you don't want a rust bucket. And I'm telling you right now, the stuff that's putting on the roads in the last 2 or 3 years is way worse. I think it's the brine from the oil field companies. And they're also, even if they don't even use that, they're going to have to use a more concentrated mixture of salt because the temperatures are going to be lower. Whether you want to argue for global warming or not, I'm going to tell you right now, global warming is going to be the exact opposite in the northeast of the United States. Even if you want, I say global warming is just an agenda, just a game they're playing to tax people on carbon credits and all this kind of crap to fund the world government. I already know that deal. But say you don't believe that and you think that's BS or something, I'll tell you one thing: that global warming in the Northeast is going to be, forget about it. You're not going to have global warming in the Northeast, man. You might have it. You say even if it did exist, the Northeast is going to be cold as crap, and there's going to be a lot of salting of the roads. So you want to protect your investment, and the type of salting they're using is far more conducive to rust formation than it has been in the past. And just beware of this. And they're looking at the numbers of what did it cost the municipality to clear the roads? What did it cost for our labor? What's our budget for the snow removal? Did we go over it? Did we go under it? They're not looking at your budget on your car. That looks like there's well, it is a fact that a record number of Americans have it's an all-time record for new car sales in 2015, especially the month of November 2015. The month that just preceded this video, right? And just December 2nd or 3rd, whatever it is. December 2nd, 2015. Well, I'm going to tell you that, these people are buying these new cars today. They're probably on a 5-year payment plan and all this other garbage. And they probably got a little bit more money because the price of oil and gasoline is a little lower, so they got a little more disposable income. That helps spur sales. And they're planning on keeping these cars a long time, and they don't want them to be like rusted out brake lines and the floors missing and stuff. So, do yourself some maintenance early here before the winter starts. You won't see any problems on your car for the first 2 or 3 years, but it will happen. It will happen. And, the other thing is don't drive it in the wintertime. That's the other way. But then again, you have to, because most people have to drive the car to go to work, and they're in commuter traffic, and they're stuck behind these salting trucks and all this other garbage. So anyway, I'm telling you, it's a little bit different now in the last several years than it was over the preceding times with this rock salt, because it's not just rock salt. There's always had the brine. They're using more brine than they had before. They're using more brine than they had before because of dropping temperatures, especially in the Northeast. Whether you want to argue that there's global warming or not, I can tell you the Northeast is not going to seem like there's global warming. And I'll tell you, I don't think global warming is legit, but the Northeast is not. December this year is going to be pretty mild. But as the winter goes, it's going to get far below normal. And a lot of states, not every state, is using oil field brine because they're getting it cheap. I'm pretty sure that's the reason why they're doing it too, because a lot of the shale oil companies that went upside down are probably dumping this stuff to get some cash flow or something. And your car that you just bought brand new in November 2015 may not show the effects of rust in the first couple of years, but it will. But you can prevent that. And I think I'm going to put some links down in the information box and some stuff I was doing with rust prevention, because I hate rust. God, I hate rust. I got cars that are like, I got an 85 Jeep, I got a 1978 El Camino, I got a 99 Sebring, and a 2003 Chevy, what do you call that thing? It's a Cavalier, but it's one of those deals where it uses compressed natural gas. So, I'm pretty well attuned to keeping old rides on a road and with rust. But, yeah, you can prevent it, and there's going to be a hell of a lot more of that stuff coming up because of the way the changes are in the road mixture. The road mixture is using a lot more brine today, and that's a hell of a lot more rusting than it was in the past, and any mechanic up in the Northeast will tell you that.